This is Pre-Algebra 101, Pre-Algebra 101. This is an introduction to some of the concepts and terms that you'll hear in algebra. There was a PowerPoint video also called Introduction to Algebra that you should watch, which will go over some more terminology. The big difference between pre-algebra and algebra is that in pre-algebra we don't go quite as fast, we don't go quite as far with the information, but we will cover enough that when you start an Algebra 1 class next year or next semester, whenever you choose to take Algebra 1, that you'll have a good idea of what to expect. A lot of pre-algebra books start off reviewing basic math. We're going to start right off with algebra, and we'll be reviewing basic math such as exponents and fractions and percents and decimals and things such as that as we go. But we're going to start right in on some algebra. So the first thing we want to see is that if we have algebra is basically substituting numbers with letters. So in an expression 2x minus 3, that is considered an algebraic expression. There are two terms in this expression. This is a term and this is a term. Most of the time your terms are separated with a plus or a minus sign, addition or subtraction sign. So you can have multiple terms so let's go with 2x plus 3y minus 1. Well, in this problem, how many terms do we have? We have 3 terms. This is your first term, second term, and your third term. A lot of times you will hear this referred to as monomials, binomials, or trinomials, or you'll hear the term a lot of times polynomial. And that information is all covered in the Introduction to Algebra video. I won't take time to go over that now. But it's important to recognize how many terms you have in an expression. So a couple things to remember. If you have 3 times 4 in a regular arithmetic problem, you use a multiplication symbol, which is basically an x. In algebra, you will not use that x anymore. You will use a raised decimal, 3 times 4. Or you can even write 3 with a 4 in parentheses. All of that means the same thing. This is 3 multiplied by 4 using an x. This is 3 multiplied by 4 using a raised dot. And this is 3 multiplied by 4 with the 4 just being in parentheses. Now, the reason we do that is because many times in algebra, x will be used as a variable. So, when I have 5x, x is my variable, 5 is my coefficient. Okay? The reason it's a variable is variables change. That x in this problem, 5x minus 3 equals, 17. We'll just kind of make up something that may, and so the x in this particular problem stands for, actually I think 4 is yeah, that would be a 4. But if I wrote another problem, 2x plus 1 equals 5, well now the x means something totally different. So when you solve these, these are 2 totally different problems. The x means something different. So it's called a variable. Your letter varies, so it's a variable. Now, in this problem here, x is the variable, 5 is the coefficient. The coefficient tells you how many of the variable you have. So here we have 5x. That's the same as 5 times x. And this is subtract 3 minus 3. 3 is considered a constant. Sometimes you'll have a sheet that may show you that that's a constant. It doesn't change. A 3 is a 3. The 5 is a coefficient, so when you put a coefficient with a variable, or put a constant with a variable, now it's called a coefficient because this amount can vary because we have a variable in there. We don't know what that is. So just a few little terms, you'll hear variable, coefficient, constant, that's kind of what it's talking about. The most important thing right now to remember is 4x plus 2y minus 3. The things that you want to know in a problem like this is what is the coefficient to y? Well, the coefficient to y is a 2. You have a 2 in front of it, so 2 is the coefficient to y. What is the coefficient to x? 4 is the coefficient to x. What is the constant in this problem? 3 would be your constant in this problem. So, or you could say -3. We'll get into that a little bit later, but you could, for now, you say 3 or -3. When you have -3 in a algebra problem, another way to read it, you can change the plus, you can change a minus to a plus and make that a negative, so it'd be plus -3. So we'll get into that a little later, don't worry about that right now. Another thing to remember, if I have 2x plus y, in this problem, the coefficient to the x is a 2. What's the coefficient to the y? If there's no coefficient, there's no numeric coefficient, it is understood to be 1. So you don't have to put the 1 there, but I just want to show you, if you have just a variable by itself, it means 1. If I have 5a plus 2b plus c, well, the coefficient for the a is 5, the coefficient for the b is 2, the coefficient for the c would be a 1. They don't have to put a 1 there, it's just understood and accepted that a 1 is the coefficient for that. So, and that, of course, was 3 terms again. Now, so we've covered multiplication. Let's talk about exponents a minute. Exponents work the same in algebra as they do in other math. If you have 2, that's a base, you raise it to the 3rd power, or in this case we could say 2 cubed. That is the same as 2 times 2 times 2. Okay? So if we change this and we use x cubed, that's the same as x times x times x. So that's how exponents work. So if we have the expression 2x squared y. Okay, so how would we write that out in algebra? Well, we would have a 2. It would be multiplied by x twice, because x squared, and that would be multiplied by y. So that's the way you would write that out, 2x squared y. So if I had 18x to the 4th power, y to the 2nd power, how would I write that out? I would write out my 18 times x times x times x times x. We've got 4 x's. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 y's times y times y. Now, it's important to realize that the exponent only goes to the base. 18 is not raised to the 4th power. Only the x is raised to the 4th power. So when I have 3x squared, I do not square my 3. I only square the x. Now later, if I do this, 3x, and I put it in parentheses and I square it, now that would be 3x times 3x, because I would be squaring everything inside of the parentheses. But if I have just a problem without the parentheses, the power only goes to the base. The exponent only goes to the base that's next to. So that's just kind of a little introduction to how the exponents are going to work. Now, another very important item in algebra that you're going to learn is learning to read expressions. What do these expressions mean? If I put x plus y, that just means that I'm adding x and y together. This is y added to x. Or you may see it worded as the sum of x and y. So if you had a problem that said write out in an algebraic expression the sum of x and y, you need to remember that sum is your answer in an addition problem, and you would have x plus y. Now we're not solving it for anything at this point. Later on we'll learn to solve equations, but this is not something we're just learning to write the expressions out now. So what if I said, what's the product of A and B? The product of A and B. Well, hopefully you remember the product of a multiplication problem. The answer in a multiplication problem is the product. So the product of A and B would be A times B. Or I could write A with B in parentheses, or I can simply write A and B. All three of those mean the same thing. All three of those are showing multiplication. If you've got two variables and you just put them side by side with no sign, you don't use an X, remember, no raised dot, no parentheses, just two variables side by side indicate multiplication. So this would give you the product of A and B. So what if I said 3 more than 5 times B? 3 more than 5 times B. Well, let's do my 5 times B first. So I'm going to put 5B. That means 5 times B. Now, I want 3 more than that. The problem is, what is 3 more than 5 times B? Then I would go plus 3. So if I put an equal sign there and solved that, which we're not going to do, that would give me 3 more than 5 times B. So these are expressions that you'll hear that will need to be translated into numbers and variables. So what if I said, what if 5 less than y? 5 less than y. You've got to be very careful in your subtraction problems that you put these in the correct order. If I want 5 less than y, the thing that would be tempting to do would be this, 5 minus y. But that's not correct, because that's y less than 5. I want 5 less than y, so I'm going to start with my y, and I want 5 less than that, so I'm going to subtract 5 from my y. Now, in multiplication, it doesn't really matter. In addition, it doesn't really matter the order. But in subtraction, it's very important that you read carefully and see what it says, because this would be 5 less than y. Now, something that's very tricky is, what if I just take out one word of this? What if I say 5 less y? I took out the than. If I went 5 less y, then I would put y minus 5, because I want 5 less y. Excuse me, I did that backwards. 5 less y. So that would be 5 less y, but if I put the than in there, 5 less than y, then I have the y minus 5. So hopefully you can see the difference between those two. 5 less than y is, you have to put the y minus the 5. 5 less y is 5 minus the y. You're taking the y away from the 5. So that is something that you'll want to watch in that. Sometimes you'll hear things about division. And when you do division, you can write them as a fraction bar, or you can write them as your division So if I want to go 8 divided by C, I could go 8 divided by C. I could write it that way, or I could write 8 over C, because that's also 8 divided by C. So that's just a little introduction to some things that we're going to be covering. The first part of algebra, we'll review this for a little while and add to this, make the expressions a little longer, a little more complicated. Then we'll be moving on to reviewing our order of operations and really get into some fun stuff when we start solving equations.